Greetings, everyone. I'm Larry Williams, the Director of the Center for the Advancement of Research Methods and Analysis at Wayne State University, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to another version of Meet the Methodologist. And we are extremely excited to have David Kinney from the University of Connecticut here to give a CARMA webcast on Dyadic Data Analysis. And we're thankful that he is also willing to take some time and talk about his career and his interest, and hopefully offer some perspective that faculty and students who watch this recording will find useful. So David, welcome to Motown, Wayne State.
Glad to be here.
So the first question that we generally start with is, how was it that you got interested in research methods in general? And then more specifically, the topic of your webcast later today on dyadic data analysis.
Well, I entered grad school and I was most interested in person perception and how to study people's perceptions of each other. And I had no idea how to do that research. And so I started working in that area on a design where you had a group of people, all of whom made perceptions of each other. And so you had dyadic data, but you had many, many dyads. And I worked on that topic for many years, and I still am working on that topic. But my students and a postdoc that I had said, why don't you look where just one person makes perceptions of another, a supervisor and a supervisee, or two people in negotiation, or a husband and a wife. And so I would say, starting in around in the late 1980s, I started looking just at one dyad member and try to figure out how to make sense out of that.
Yeah. So you mentioned graduate school. While you were in graduate school, did you have a favorite research methods course that you took that really had an impact on you? And if so, why that particular one?
I took a course from Tom Cook while he was writing with Don Campbell, Cook and Campbell, which was the revision of Campbell and Stanley. And Tom Cook was really excited about writing that, and actually he taught me quite a bit and learned quite a bit. And it's actually in that class where I first learned about this concept called mediation.
Uh-huh.
And anyway, but that definitely was the best class that I took as a grad student.
Yeah, so that's certainly an area that you have stayed with throughout your career. Was there something about it at that particular time that kind of captured your interest?
Well, it had nothing direct. Well, but I also worked with Don Campbell, and I should probably say that his class was the best class that I took or whatever, but that wasn't the case. It was Tom's. But Don, as an advisor, was working on what he called the experimenting society, and how by doing interventions we could design a better society and create a better society. So, and then Tom's class on quasi-experimentation and research design sort of fed into this. And you have to think of this. This was a long time ago, before almost everyone watching this was born. So this was in the 60s, and there was a sense of, enthusiasm about changing society and making the world better. I was young, so believe it or not.
So as you look back on those courses, did you face any particular challenges in learning about research methods that was a part of your experience that may resonate with our viewers?
No. But probably because I surely didn't say that. It was the 60s too, and I was arrogant, and things just seemed easy, and it didn't. It was a different sort of time. So no, I think it wasn't so much difficulties or obstacles. There was an incredible enthusiasm, and Don Campbell generated this enthusiasm about using methods to improve society and help society. And it was also at a time, too, where methods were really developing. It was the early days, beginning stages of SEM, and pretty soon meta-analysis was going to be invented, and lots of new, exciting things were happening.
Yeah. And so, well, you have a lot of experience teaching research methods. What about the students that you encounter now?
Well,
Is there seem to be some kind of common challenges or difficulties that they face as they try to process the material?
Definitely, there's challenges. My suggestion to students is best, if you're going to take a methods class, have your own data. If you have your own data, and as you're learning the material, if you can be analyzing your data, then you really learn the material, and you can understand the material in the context of your own data. So that'd be my suggestion. Okay. If you're trying to learn a method in the abstract, for most people, and myself included, it's pretty boring, and it can be hard to motivate yourself.
Because of all of your success, you've had a lot of experience as a reviewer for substantive papers, probably in several domains that have using analytical techniques that you've been involved with. So I was wondering whether you could comment on what you see as some of the most frequent limitations or shortcomings of the papers that you review. Particularly with respect to research methods and analysis, but also perhaps for theory as well.
I'm going to kind of answer a different question.
Absolutely.
I'm going to be like a politician. It's political season.
I've asked some different questions, so you can certainly answer some different questions.
So what I would more want to talk about from the point of view of not the reviewer, but the person getting back reviews, that in this field, you're going to get negative reviews. And you're going to experience a lot of disappointment. I know, and working with Don Campbell, Don would say in his office, he'd point up to the walls, he said, I could create wallpaper of rejection letters. And he was, in some ways, not proud of his rejections, but he realized that, sometimes if you're working on the cutting edge, you're the one who gets cut, and you're going to bleed, and you're going to get rejections. I've been lucky, and I've been somewhat successful, but I should also say that twice in my career I've gotten 10 rejections in a row. So that means 10 papers in 10, not the same paper, but sometimes 10 different papers that comes back rejection 10 times in a row. So you're going to face a lot of adversity, a lot of difficulty, and it's not easy, but you got to just keep, you got to keep on trying. So that I would say, in terms of the question you actually asked me, the problem sometimes is lack of detail. I'd like usually a little more detail, but anyway.
Yeah. So you mentioned Cook and Campbell, and I'm wondering whether that would be your favorite research methods book that either influenced you greatly or that you rely upon regularly currently, or whether there's some other kinds of classics that continue to have a guiding influence for you.
I would say, like a lot of faculty members, at a certain point, I rely on my students to read and kind of keep me going. So I'm going to pass on that question too. I learn much more these days from my students, and they kind of tell me what I should be reading, but I then rely on them to read it and explain it to me. So I maybe that's not the right answer, but that's the truth.
Okay. I'd like for you to kind of now step back and try to look at our field, whether it's social psychology or organizational psychology, and take a big picture perspective. And the question is, are there topical areas within research methods and data analysis of all that goes into that kind of field that you think we do a particularly good job of investigating or a particularly bad job of investigating? I mean, the research methods work, not the applications, but the research methods work itself.
So what? That's a big picture. I think we need to be more creative, but that's obviously the case. I don't have a good answer there. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
That's 3 in a row I haven't answered. If anyone's keeping track out there.
No problem. Now, you mentioned the advice to persevere.
Right.
Okay. So I'm wondering, given your success as a scholar, whether you have other advice for doctoral students who are wanting to pursue a career as a researcher.
I'd say one thing to do is pick interesting problems for a lot of reasons. It's a lot more fun to work on something interesting, but sometimes we get channeled to work on small, little, very boring problems. And certainly there is some need to work on those problems. I worked on them myself. But if you're trying to think of this as a career, you want to pick a big, difficult problem to work on. So difficult that it's not easy to do, and then try to work hard on that problem. Spend a lot of time working on the problem, and I think, and this is not easy to do, and I wasn't very good at it myself early on in my career, is when you're working on a problem, kind of the best thing sometimes to do is not to work on the problem, which sounds paradoxical, but you work so hard on something, you're only going at it one way. If you can put it aside, and this is where vacations, childcare are these are good things because you get away from the problem. Then when you come back to it, and sometimes you might even come back to it a year later, 2 years later, you'll come back at it at a different angle and actually begin to maybe make some new progress. Sometimes you'll come back at it at a new angle and realize that's a total dead end and you need to go back where you started. But sort of working on it there. But I think and part of why picking an interesting problem is this is your work, this is your life's work, and certainly there's things that you want to happen, like get grants and get publications and get tenure, and those things certainly are important in many ways, but it's the day-to-day satisfaction that you get in your work, and if you're not working on something that's fun and enjoyable, my children would say to me, "Dad, you're not supposed to like your work. You're doing something wrong. You like your work." And I did. I think eventually convince them that no, you're supposed to like your work. It's supposed to be fun.
So let me jump ahead a little
Sure.
bit then. So what is it about your work that you like so much? And was there a point when, whether you were an undergrad or early in your graduate career, that you knew that you wanted to have the academic career and the pursuit of research? And what is it that keeps you going?
I don't know the answer to that. But no, I think, if you find something interesting, you find it interesting. I don't want to, if I tried to overanalyze why I found it interesting, it probably wouldn't become interesting. But I think, I'm a social psychologist. I'm interested in people. I'm trying to understand people. I sort of backed into studying methods because I didn't know how to study people and that sort of thing. What keeps me going? I don't know what keeps me going.
Are there aspects of your work that of the various tasks that you have to engage in that you like the most, and some that you like the least?
I think what for me, a number of years ago, I gave a talk at the American Psychological Association, and Stephen West introduced me. And Steve said, and he did not quite getting this right, but Steve said when he was in graduate school, he learned a bunch of things. He learned you can't study families, you can't study accuracy in person perception, and you can't make causal inferences unless you do experiments. And a lot of what methodology is about historically is telling people what they can't do. It's sort of that methodologists and statisticians are like priests who are saying, no, that's wrong. You're going to go to statistical hell if your data aren't normal or something. Where what I've done and what's given me pleasure is not only in my own work, but also showing people how in their work they can answer the questions they want to answer. So they can study families. They can study teams and relationships. You can, in a limited way, have study causality outside of the laboratory. And you can study accuracy and person perception. So what gives me a lot of pleasure is kind of showing people how to do things. And so very often researchers want to study a question, they don't know quite how to do that, and then they read my work and my work opens a door to them, as opposed to often what methodology does is shut a door. And that part's been gratifying.
Yeah. Is there anything that you do? You mentioned whether it's something like being away with family, or is there anything that you do that to draw inspiration and motivation for your work? Like hobbies?
Sleep. No, sleep actually does play an important role. Dreams and so on. But I think most of that is just distraction, not so much inspiration. And I think distraction is good, and getting away is good, and yeah, definitely is good.
All right. Our last question, in about an hour and a half, you're going to be giving your webcast lecture on dyadic data analysis. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the origins. I know you mentioned that earlier, but your origins,
right,
your interest in that, and then kind of a quick summary of the content.
Well, most of data analysis historically is of individual data. So when we, I know got to do this quick, but anyway, I've started.
Take as long as you want.
Okay, so when we enter data into a program, there's one line, and that's for each individual. Usually, a person, could be a country, could be a company. But social life is social, and we're tied to other people in relationships. We're tied in teams. We're tied in organizations, and so. So if we think about data, often has not an individual structure, but I guess the more contemporary term and kind of an exciting thing that's developed is this work on multi-level analysis, that where multiple levels are simultaneously operating. So what am I answering here? So this is sort of, anyway, so that's kind of the overriding kind of meta idea of this work in terms of trying to look at things at multiple levels. And so what I'm going to do in the workshop is talk about dyadic data. First, there's some fundamental definitions that are critical, at least I think are critical in trying to work with dyadic data. Then we're going to talk about a popular model for looking at dyadic data, something called the actor-partner interdependence model. And then we're going to estimate that model using SPSS, which is a very simple, straightforward approach. And so we're going to use SPSS, and we're going to actually go through a simple analysis. And then at the end of the talk, I'm going to talk about a project where a computer algorithm that could be written and has been written for this approach that will not only kind of do the set of analyses, but also write up the results for you in a sort of elementary form. And that's something called data to text. So that's our plan in the 3 hours, of the 1 hour that we have for that presentation.
Yeah. Well, we will look forward to that very much, and we're very excited to have you and appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts about career and research. So thank you very much.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yep.